Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Friday. Here with Oaks, talking about audience building, using HubSpot to build audience. I feel like audience is a term thrown around a lot right now. So maybe we can help them make sense of this. What do you say?
I would love.
Yes, and we happen to be talking about probably the best tool that you have access to that can help you do this and help you do it in the best way. So, how you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling all right. I'm always energized talking about this and helping people do it. So I'm pumped, which is also another way to say you have access to the emergency brake if you need me to slow down, because I will just keep going and going and fly through this stuff.
I love it. That's why we're here. What are we flying through today?
Let me go ahead and pull up, if anybody saw last time, a diagram here that for talking about this. So, um, as you, I think, I agree, correctly stated that HubSpot is the best tool for, particularly on the side where I focus, which is sales and marketing, both strategy and like continuous deployment and improvement of strategies there, for uh, effectively serving an audience well. And this can mean things like, a broadcast audience where you are doing like subscriptions and community style things, but it also means the audiences within your marketing and sales strategy, right? The uh, the ability to identify groups of people within those audiences and serve them effectively is unparalleled in HubSpot from any other CRM tools. The things that you can do are um, accessible without a lot of additional third-party integrations or technical understanding or development. It's like even just, and not just a marketer, but a solo marketer can do this in HubSpot, do it effectively, and demonstrate ROI from audience-focused sales and marketing strategies. And we are going to kind of do a whirlwind tour, kind of skipping the stone across the top of the lake, look at some of these things today. Um, so, for example, in this diagram here, right, what we have, just to recap, is left to right marketing and sales tools within HubSpot represented as swim lanes, where the customers kind of journey at a high level left to right. And what we want to demonstrate at the bottom is over the course of that journey, we are learning more and more about an individual customer, but that forms the basis of what we know about them ongoing so that we can reapply it every time we try to support someone through their decision-making process. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of attracting, but mostly converting and identifying members of your audience, by which I mean people you are targeting with your marketing. Some ways using basics like the marketing emails within HubSpot to serve them in a very tactical way, and then how you kind of see some of those outputs. And in future sessions, we'll come back and talk about some of these other tools that we can do with them.
Yeah, and like I love that we're talking about this because this is always I've always hesitated to talk about, you know, and learn about honestly the depths of Marketing Hub specifically because so much of this is based on understanding, who your target audience is, your ideal client profile, like how to how do you build the understanding of the customer through your organization. uh even understanding that, so you can actually build it into HubSpot without relying on people entering data like exclusively, right? Because what I've
Yeah.
seen, and you know, you're like, oh yes, we've got this awesome tool that we can just personalize and automate. So, sales guy, here's the 20 properties that I need you to fill in to make sure that we can do the stuff that marketing wants to do.
Right. And frankly, it's too late too by the time, right? Like you can reapply some of that stuff, but by the time that like in this diagram, sales is like doing one-on-one down all the way over here, right? So are we going to accept that everything above when a salesperson gets on a phone with somebody, we're just going to do a total crap job at that, right? And we're not going to personalize. We're just going to fire hose everybody and hope for the best. And people, they'll convert, right? Even if we're not speaking their language and don't understand their needs. Like, personally, I don't find that acceptable, right? That is not
Right.
how
Oh,
people want to engage with an organization.
we just need one or two hits. It's all good, man.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If we convert two, it's okay if we burn 1,000 leads, right? Um, so, and the other side of that, and this would be maybe a good topic for later, is I have many underlying philosophies, but one of them is that marketing is a one-to-many engagement. Sales is a one-to-one engagement, right? And um, the data that if you want to burden your sales team with collecting a whole lot of properties, you can collect very precise information about a given prospect, but it's a lot of work also to then try to like analyze that and roll that up to start to see patterns at a higher level. That isn't a bad thing to do if you have the depth and the resources to do it. And that is typically available, in my experience, to organizations when their marketing team starts to reach like 20. And that is a very small sliver of the market, right? Like, oh, we have 1,000 closed lost leads. Let's do an analysis. Like, okay, well, we can take if we collected some good notes and we collected categorization and some scoring, then we can do some analysis, even in Excel or feed it to ChatGPT or to whatever and like get some basic patterns. But that's a research project that a lot of people just don't have the capacity for. Um, and we don't want that to be a blocker to, again, especially performing at top of the funnel where we have the least amount of engagement and time to help people understand whether we're the right solution for them, right? So we need tools that scale from one to many, that give marketing one to many leverage or one to few leverage, that hand directly off to one leverage when the sales team is engaging with somebody, right? And we're going to talk about the first half of that today, and the second half of that in some later sessions.
Yeah.
So
And
go
this is
ahead.
where like understanding the process again that the buyer is going to take. Because let's say you get that sales guy who's all in on marketing, understands the value of all this, is entering those 20 properties in every time, like doing his due diligence, but they're not drop downs, like they're single
Right,
text fields, and then you have somebody ready to go through all the 1,000 leads, and then they spend all their time cleaning the data so that
right,
they can even analyze it in the first place. There's so much that can be done up front based on which web page they're on, based on where the form gets filled,
right.
right? All these tools are for like, okay, let's establish the 20 properties that we need with the sales team. But then how much of that can we get done, earlier in the process?
For sure. And after one quarter of doing that, even that like super engaged salesperson who's like, I know that marketing can help me do my job better and can deliver me better qualified leads if I help them out in this way. At the end of the first quarter, when you haven't delivered anything to improve for them, then they're going to be like, well, I tried that for 90 whole days and 200 calls, and just didn't do me any good, so I give up, right?
Yeah.
And uh, you know that is that's not the kind of relationship you want to establish with the sales team, right?
Not at all.
Um, so, um, so let's talk. I'm going to switch windows here and talk a little bit. There's going to be a lot of nuts and bolts in addition to strategy as we talk through this. Let me pull up for the audience. You're about to see a HubSpot sandbox, and I'm going to actually set this tab up so that it's not giving away the ending
Yeah.
here.
And I was telling Oaks before the show, it's like a lot of this stuff, especially when association labels start to get built in, and like the data piece, I'm so focused there because I know these other tool, like the rest of the HubSpot tool set, all the automation, all the personalization. If you don't have the data right, you never get to take advantage of these tools. And most of the times in organizations, especially the ones, I was in, where it's just like we can't even get past data cleanup mode. Like none of these tools are accessible. So when I hear things like, oh, we can send a specific email based on the product that they purchased last year, it's like, I theoretically, I know how powerful that's going to be. But like when we
Right.
can't even show which product they bought last year, that doesn't matter. Right. So I'm
Right.
excited to see your examples today.
Yeah. I mean, or the other, that I run into things like that, like, oh, well, which product did they show interest in, right? Like, oh, we have closed lost, we have a bunch of closed lost prospects. We know what they inquired about. And let's say you've set up categorization, which is not a closed lost reason, right? Is in HubSpot, the default property. And one of my underlying philosophies: do not be the victim of defaults. Let's say you do what every experienced HubSpot admin does, which is in the first 48 hours that you have access to a hub, you create a closed lost category property that is a drop down, and then you train the sales team and SDR on how to set that and what the guidelines are. Um, you would say like, oh, people who inquired, and one of our closed lost categories is not it wouldn't be a future deal killer. It's like bad timing, right? Okay, and you want to get those people into a workflow. Well, what if they inquired about more than one product, right? And then you've got two emails going out. One that's like, oh, hey, is now the new budget year, is now the right time for product A? And then the next email in their inbox, new budget year, is now the right time for product B? Because when you were building the campaign, you didn't break down, you didn't have a systems kind of thinking approach and say like, oh, it can be more than one, right? Or is there even like a category preclusion, right? Of like, if they qualify for A, they wouldn't buy B and vice versa. And then you're sending people things that are not relevant. So we're going to actually start um, at the kind of fundamentals, right? So this is a first step that you can do wherever you're at in the kind of sophistication journey in sales and marketing, um, to um, to get started without a lot of ask. And again, we're starting all the way at the left hand side of that diagram on the kind of like attract and convert um, side. So I'm going to show you. HubSpot has a built-in property called persona, and it's okay. It's a lot fancier than a normal property, but it has some complications that if you're working with it. It can behave unusual in some scenarios, and it's hard to manage like versioning and adding and removing. So the way that I counsel people to do it, and do it with clients that I'm advising this on, is creating a dedicated property on the contact, and then you can either, in the future we'll talk about how we different ways to get this to a deal if you use deals. But it's a drop down property that has a value for each of your named segments. And so like an audience in the Who First model, an audience profile I like to say is like a persona, except you can actually use it. Um, a lot of companies think about segmenting their audience by like market size or company size and dimensions like that, firmographics. Um, those are fine, but those are really more like targeting criteria on an ad platform rather than something that tells you about who the customer is and how they make a purchase decision, right? Um, so for now, we're gonna put a pause on what the content of these should be. We'll come back to that later. Um, but these are four specific personas or audience profiles that tell me something about what I want to offer them, what they're, let's go simple. I said we'll put a pause on content, but what their kind of end goal and what their current state or pain points are, right? So these are four distinct patterns based on research done with customers around that, and then an undetermined. So so I've got this just basic, it's a drop down property. You can add this. You don't need any fancy subscriptions in order to add it. And that gives us a place to hang a tag on a customer, on a contact in HubSpot that says, this person has this kind of challenge and this is what they're looking to accomplish, right? So let's imagine that if you're in marketing, imagine if every time a lead went over to sales, and let's say, in that scenario, you create deals, um, they get a new deal in the first stage of their pipeline. They get a notification, they go in and open it, and that deal says, for example, let me pull these back up. They open it up and it says, this prospect belongs to our difficulty with diagnosis audience profile, right? So this is a subset of our prospective customers who have a specific challenge. In this case, the difficulty with diagnosis is an audience profile that has hit a performance plateau and they do not know, they've tried several things, have not been able to get out of that plateau, right? Like we've tried increasing budgets, we tried new platforms, we tried this, we tried that, and we don't know what's going on. That it tells the SDR or the sales team member a lot more about how to approach that initial conversation than just like, oh, lead score 27, here's their email, you can look at the company and it has firmographics in it, and then call, right? So, if you're calling them and you're like, so what are your challenges, right? And then you're starting the research process over again with them. Um, you skip all of those steps if you know that, right? Um, so if we say like, okay, we now have the definition of who these segments of our audience are, we have a place to store it in HubSpot. The question, of course, is how do we get it onto that contact in HubSpot so that when the when we create a deal or when a rep calls that contact or emails them, they can see it. Well, back to our diagram, right? We have we do marketing activities that we hope attract people to a conversion context, right? And that can be organic social posts. It can be ads across, like display advertising. It can be podcast ads. It can be search ads, right? It can be thought leadership ads on LinkedIn. We have all of those activities that funnel into some conversion experience, whether it's on our website or whether it's on the platform, meaning the advertising platform, right? A Facebook form.
Yeah.
In
And
this case, go ahead.
let me just, if I make sure I'm thinking about this right, in past life, there was, and I'm finding with uh, in a lot of go-to-market situations, there might be three levels of audience where it's people who have no idea about the category that you're selling. Um, People who have a great idea and they're likely competitive, they're using competitive options. And then you have customers that know you and right. And in one of these past situations where there's no pipeline, there's no really market. Uh, if we target the people who know about the thing, we're going to lose those deals every time because we don't have brand equity. Like the competitive offering is better, whatever. Right. So there was a choice to focus on the people who knew nothing about the technology. They're using some kind of old status quo.
Yeah.
And so as we built out the website, you know, we're expecting people to be in a lot of that, my first rodeo
Mm-hmm.
situation versus, the other points. And then like as we serve up content, it changed the whole homepage, right? Like it's
Yeah.
educational. First, there's products at the bottom, right? And when you use HubSpot, you can see like, okay, did they go through some of this stuff first, like the webinars or so using
Yeah.
this and deciding this first is just so powerful because now it can speak to the rest of the process,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And that's what, and I'm going to show you that. And it's a good example. Like in some cases, what you're describing there, right, um, is early funnel stuff, right? Like the classic, problem aware or problem unaware, problem aware, solution unaware, solution aware. There's a lot of different models and frameworks for trying to describe how uh, people go through that process of realization and selecting. Sometimes that is not necessarily a profile. Sometimes they are stages in a journey, but sometimes they are profiles. Like in this case, my first rodeo is a profile. These are all, I've changed the names, but these are all abstracted from actual profiles that I've created with clients in the past. There are some businesses where the first time you purchase a product or solution service in their category, it is a it is so different that you need to treat that entire journey differently than somebody who has even been adjacent to a purchase in the past. And so in scenarios like that, that's not just a stage of the journey, that's almost a whole different pipeline, right?
Yep.
And so tagging like, hey, we have a big complex purchase, and we know that first time purchasers are a super important part of our business. You've got to tag those people as early as possible so that you can respond to them, right? Um, but that's a great point. And so like again, the number one, um, we're going to get again all that stuff that you described, like personalizing like the site content and things. I would put for a lot of organizations that's kind of at the 301 level, right, where it's hard enough to get the homepage approved when it's a static homepage, right? And so saying like, oh well, if we know this about them, it's going to change, and it could be this, it could be that, like a lot of even CMOs and CEOs kind of like, well, show me what it'll look like. And it's like, well, it's gonna be
Yeah.
different for everybody.
No
That
baggage
scares
there.
people, right? um, but one of the things that you can super easily res- uh, personalize or contextualize is the first post conversion email, right? That they get. It's low stakes from like a review and approval standpoint, and it makes for some reason, despite the fact that like viewing the homepage is a personal experience, it's one person usually looking at that page in a browser. Email feels like it is a feels to most people like a safer place to do that. Everyone is familiar with personalization in email context, and it uh, it's already kind of a temperature of the water best practice. Oh, you should personalize emails for people, right? So it's a great place to start first. Build some trust, show that you can do it, and then prove you've got some winning tools. So actually, I didn't show the form first really quick. So again, to recap, we've got a property where we can pin a badge on our contacts and say, this is here's what we know about them. So we've got to get that into HubSpot. And again, starting at 101, the easiest way to get that on a contact is the HubSpot form that they convert from, right? Um, and the two easiest way to do that is to have, let's show this basic one first, which is just a conversion form where they put in their email, and I'm using that same audience profile property, and I've changed the label to say, what's your biggest concern, right? There's a lot of ways that you could do this. You could do, you probably would want or have first name, last name, and maybe company or other properties on this form. But at the most basic level, we're collecting enough to create a contact, and we're asking them to provide some input, right? And I've changed the labels to customer language that aligns with our profiles, right? So my biggest concern is I'm not seeing results with my current solution, or I need to scale out our execution, right? I'm struggling to keep things running, or I'm not sure how to start, right? You can phrase these however you want, but what we want is if we are going to use a form, excuse me, if we're going to use a field on a form connected to that property that allows our customers to self-select, then we need to have it make sense to them, right? I wouldn't want to show them my first rodeo, right? But if you do your homework right, and maybe we'll talk about this another time, you build these profiles based on conversations and research with actual customers, and you have actual customer language here, right? So
Yes.
that what you really want is when they load up this page, or this form, I'm skipping some steps there, but this form on a page on your website, if this what's your biggest concern field is there, and they tap or click on it, and what they see here is something that they have thought in their own heart or head about their problem, then they are going to tap it, and they are going to say to themselves, maybe out loud, if you do this well enough, they get it, right? Like if my first rodeo, if what you actually called this was, I've never done this before, but I know I need it. Um, if you have that my first rodeo profile in your audience, and they fly that field out and see this, they're going to be like, yeah, they get me. Tap, great. Boom, positive brand interaction. And you have got probably the most valuable thing you can get from a prospect ahead of an actual transaction, which is them affirmatively telling you, this is the thing that I would love it if you could help me do, right? That's why we want to get that and better serve them throughout the sales and marketing journey before they even get a salesperson on the phone, where the power dynamic is also a little bit different, right?
Yeah. And this is like, it's so easy. And this is where like marketing, you got to work with sales, on this kind of stuff. Cause they're usually, that's where a lot of the research can start. Like, what are you asking questions to figure out, what
Mm-hmm.
these people want, what their pain points are, but then not like, but there's also a place, well, oh, we're asking them too much. We need to convert on the form. Like, this is the easiest way. And if you
Well,
give it to them in the right place, at the right
I'm about
time.
to address that and make it even easier for you.
Right.
Um,
We got to
so
ask. That's the key.
yeah,
Like,
well,
if
yeah, you do. You have to ask sales. I would argue that marketing should be talking to customers. Sales is the only organization that is expected to talk to customers. And how can marketing serve customers if they don't talk to them?
yeah,
If your marketing team doesn't have regular interactions with customers that are not like conversion focused, then you need to sit down and have a meeting and figure out how you think you could possibly attract new customers without knowing anything about them.
that's a good point.
If anybody watching wants like hour-long stern lecture from me about that, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to do it. But um, so here's another version of that same form that has um, this is I take that out. That doesn't need to be there. That was a little sample field that I added. Um, but in our diagram here, right, like we do all of these top of funnel activities to bring people in the attract stage. Um, as I said, ads, thought leadership. It can be also like, you know, like top of funnel educational content, videos on YouTube, whatever. Um, we want to collect this um, profile data on a form. That doesn't mean that we need to ask for it if we can infer it from the context of the conversion, right? In the same way that, one of the at the 201 level of adopting marketing, HubSpot in a marketing organization, one of the things that people figure out they can do is see what pages people convert from, and that is super useful, and it can often tell you something. It's not load bearing. I wouldn't put a lot on it. Um, you know, it's often like, oh, let's see how many people viewed our team page and then converted, right? Or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay,
They must
sure.
care
I
about
mean,
culture.
yeah, the answer is very few. I can guarantee it. I've been asked, I don't know how many times, 50. I've been asked to like, how do we make a report that shows that? Um, that's usually more like an analysis rather than an ongoing report. But um, if we do have this own earn paid happening up at the attract stage of the sales and marketing funnel or journey, um, and we have content, whether it's just a simple ad. I mean, let's take my first rodeo as an example, right? Like if you can write some thought leadership or ad content that says something like, I know I need a solution X, but I don't know, I've never done it before, right?
Are you trying to
And
plan your first rodeo? Click
right,
here.
yes, exactly, right. Or like a YouTube video that's like planning your first rodeo. Like here's the 10 things, you'll never believe what happens next, whatever. Um, and those two top of funnel marketing, we're going to call those activities for now, drive the prospects onto a landing page that is targeted at my first rodeo. So they then land on that landing page, let's say for simplicity's sake, and all of your content on that page, your kind of your positioning, your brand is all tweaked so that it is specific to my first rodeo. Then you embed a form. In this case, we're going to set it on my first rodeo as hidden the pre-selected value for the hidden field of audience profile, right? And then you would update that, which I haven't. And then you embed this form on that landing page so that if somebody watches my first rodeo YouTube video, takes the CTA, uh, or you turn that video into 30-second bumpers on YouTube. So then target people who would watch the video. They click on that, they come to the landing page, they dwell a little bit, and they submit this form. We create a contact for HubSpot in them, and we have pinned them as uh, members of our My First Rodeo audience profile, right? So instead of, oh, where did they convert? Should we set up a custom workflow or like whatever? Or where did these leads come from? Like, let's get sales and find out, and they'll see what their needs are. Instead, we have a pretty good bet, right? It's not going to be 100%, but we've got a pretty good bet that we're starting from second base on figuring out what these folks' needs are and how we would support them at the very first outset with our automations that react to initial conversion in HubSpot, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And even like,
so go ahead.
oh man, this reminds me of so many Google Ads conversations where, this is the difference between the goal being the click on the ad and the difference between conversion when they get to the place and then actually closing the deal, right? Like
Right,
if we're not if we don't take that journey into account, which we usually don't because it's like, all right, we need leads, let's just throw some money at Google Ads.
right,
And then I'm like, okay, what happens when they click on the ad? Oh, they get to our homepage.
right.
Oh,
Or even if they get to a landing page, right? It's like, oh, we wrote, the again, like at the 101 level, the number of Meta and Google Ads accounts I've seen where they're like, oh yeah, like we've got 10 versions of the ad, and you look at it and it's like, oh, the image is on the left, the text is on the right, the image is on the right, the text is on the left. It's like, oh, we're uh, testing an ad with like two female presenting people versus one male, one female presenting, or it's one where it's partners with kids, and it's one where it's just partners or whatever. It's like, oh, you're not testing anything useful there, right?
right.
Um, uh, that like getting one of the promises of attribution, right? And whether it's in a tool like HubSpot or a more sophisticated or less sophisticated tool like Google Ads, um, is every interaction that somebody has with you should be this snowball of information, right? That tells you something. And and if you are only collecting like these default functional metrics, like how many clicks an ad got, right? Like what you know, explain to a VP like what this version of the ad got more clicks. Okay, so what did we learn? Well, we learned if we show these two ads, one of them works better. It's okay, why, right? And how do we do better with this? Because uh, I've been a party to so many conversion journeys, right, where uh, I've seen multiple cases where somebody A/B tests two ads and they select a winner, and then they create another one. They A/B the winner versus the challenger, and then another winner challenger, right? And then I've started recommending people do this because I've seen it happen more than once, where you have a series of like 3 or 4 winners, right? And you're like, this must be the best ad. It converts at almost 3.7%. And then some smart ass like me says like, hey, take your first loser and run it against this our ultimate winner here, right? And I have seen that happen where at the initial A/B test, loser beats the challenge, beats the winner that that is in theory at the top of the bracket for those A/B tests. And it's like, well, who the customers who are searching are changed over time, right? Like the market has moved, like there are all of these different changes, right? But the people who were in the market for your solution 6 months ago, or let's say it's 2024, right? Like 4 years ago, are very different than the people who are in the market now. So the idea that you can run an A/B test on an ad and then like think, "Whew, we got our marketing strategy figured out," like we tested an ad 4 years ago, is crazy.
Oh
But
yeah.
anyway,
No, it is
um,
crazy. And that's where it's like HubSpot and other companies have done no service to the community by making that feel so important. And, a lot of times that's what you're paying for when you start to increase levels, especially in Marketing Hub. So when,
right,
people come to me and talk about customer journey analytics, I'm like, it's just, we've seen it too many times where so much happens between first interaction and closed one, and we're
Yeah.
way over indexed on that top of the funnel spot.
Right.
And then sales and the rest of the team are not tracking any of the other information because that situation you described, like there's 10 total clicks, 9 of them are from one ad. The one that closed was from the other one.
Right.
Like, and you can't see that. So you're not
Right.
actually testing anything. And by the way, 10 clicks is probably not statistically significant anyways.
Yeah, it is not.
So,
If you're making decisions based on 10 click A/B, I don't know what to tell you, folks. Uh, wait more, I guess, is what I have
hey,
to tell you.
HubSpot lets me do the test, man.
Yeah,
So it
declare
must be
winner.
valuable.
Um, another top of funnel. So here's a great application of this tooling here that I'm showing you. Right, we've got a property where we pin a badge on people and say like to our current best knowledge, this is a my first rodeo person. Uh, and then we have a methodology for getting that pin on them via, in this case, the form. Um, if your customers or your market is one where something like where offering pre-conversion or pre-purchase like tools like audits and assessments or diagnostics to, or even just like fun quizzes or whatever, to your prospects makes sense and you're not just shoehorning it. That is a great way to both increase your confidence in the profile that you are putting someone on and build up engagement with those folks. So I'm going to show you like here's that email that I had up a minute ago. But like let's say that this is an automated marketing email. It's inquiry response to submitting a self-assessment quiz. It's version 1 of this email. So let's imagine that you had a quiz, whether it's like, you know, just a basic drop down fields in a HubSpot form, or you're doing something like an external, like a job form that passes a value to HubSpot, right? When you're going to level up on some of these things or these interactive modules. Um, when you, the output of that, either way, whether it's a simple form or whether it's one of those, it's an assessment, right? That's like, help me figure out my unique challenges, right? They answer a series of questions. Is that contact in HubSpot with their profile pinned onto them so that we can use it to support their journey and their purchase decision, right? So what I've mocked up here with the basic HubSpot default content is a marketing email, and I've just added a button to it, right? The idea here being they've taken their quiz, and at the end of the quiz, we say, we think you're my first rodeo. We're going to email you the a game plan downloadable something, right? That
Your
we've
guide to
created.
planning rodeos.
Right, exactly. And because we know what these different audiences' needs are, we've developed a different post conversion downloadable for them, right? So, like our diagnosis, I described them as having hit a performance plateau, right? So they are much further along than a my first rodeo in terms of sophistication, in terms of decision making, in terms of needs. They're probably bigger teams. Um, uh, and so all of these have discrete outcomes that they're looking for, and their situations are different in patterns that we have recognized and validated among our customers. So they have gone through a self-assessment quiz that has put that um, profile on them with a, from our perspective, fairly high degree of confidence, right? They've answered whatever 12 questions, and we can say we're 80% sure that your profile is X, right? So they get this stuff can all be static. In this case, it is, right? We've got the first personalization that everybody, and for I think 80% of customers, 80% of businesses, the only personalization they add to their marketing
Oh
emails,
yeah,
right? First
yeah.
name.
We
We
personalize our
Yep.
emails.
good news, boss. In Q3, we personalized our marketing emails. Um, so the only difference that gonna we're gonna apply here is really simple. It's low hanging fruit. When somebody gets this email, or I should say, technically, when this email is constructed by HubSpot and then sent to these folks, we've got, let me just highlight this. This is a smart module, which means it has had some smart rules added, which and this is a contact list. So if the recipient of this email that goes out from HubSpot is on one of these contact lists, which is just a dynamic list in HubSpot that's if your profile is my first rodeo, I need a breakthrough, bigger, better backup, difficulty diagnosis. It includes those contacts on those lists. Then this module displays different content, right? And so I'm going to look at this module for my first rodeo. So when this button is being sent to my first rodeo, it's going to link to a file download, and I choose the button, change the button text to choosing your first solution, right? And, or as you said, planning your first rodeo.
This is pretty. This is the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm used to seeing this on like CMS pages and stuff, and
Right.
this is real
And
nice.
so you would just then pick the file from your HubSpot file browser, right? You've got those, let's say 5 in this case. We'll talk about why 5 versus 4, which is a number of profiles we have um, to upload, right? You don't need to go again 101. You don't need to go with fancy personalization of the content itself. We've got a one piece of that downloadable content tailored for each of those audiences, right? So that if it's your first rodeo, you get the planning your first rodeo button, and it links to the your first rodeo file, which is more introductory. It has like some early, like, here's how you vet the solutions, and here's what all these terms mean, and here's, very educational, slow burn content. Um, and you just have a custom version of that button built on the smart module with for each of those audiences. So for our difficulty with diagnosis, right, which is where we talked about plateau, having hit a performance plateau that they can't break out of, you have the downloadable assumes a lot more base knowledge and experience. It assumes maybe that there is a competitive solution or some kind of asymmetric solution in place that's not like a direct name competitor, but another way to solve the problem that isn't working for them. And it's more focused on the potential causes of a plateau and finding bottlenecks in your process and how to tackle them, and probably also how your solution helps them identify and address those bottlenecks, right? So just by having the property, a form that collects it, and those deliverables that marketing has created for you, and one smart module button in your email, you now have a pretty solid top of funnel conversion flow for your prospects that delivers a conversion context that recognizes their needs, and immediately the first follow-up interaction they have is one that says, like, here is something tailored to exactly your situation, right? And even a marketing team of one can realize this, right?
So
It's
powerful.
not super hard. And if you will be ahead of 80% of your competition if you just do this.
Yeah,
And
and this
now
is where
let me
like
show you the real kicker, right? Like, once we've done that, we have converted people with their profile. We have defined our profile. We have captured it. We have pinned it. We have delivered a like sales and marketing, a supportive sales and marketing experience for those folks. When we actually close some deals with where we have collected those profiles, you can start to answer one of the common questions that people have never done serious profile work. They they use StoryBrand, or they do some I call them Mad Lib personas. You download a template and it's like, what social media networks do they use, and
Yeah.
what's their favorite breed of cat, right, or whatever. It doesn't have anything to do with it. They do all that work and they're like, now what, right? Here's the now what, right? If we have converted people with a profile, taken them all the way through the experience, and I even would say, if sales talks to somebody and they realize like, oh, I see why they got scored on my first rodeo, they are actually whatever. We need a breakthrough. You would flip that, right, and correct it. We're not chiseling this into stone, but this is a dashboard, again, like per here, right? At the end of the experience, when we are doing customer understanding work, we should know a lot more about our customers when they convert, right? So we have things like, this is life cycle, but like life cycle survivorship broken down by audience profile, right? So let's take, where's my first rodeo here? So in this, this is a sandbox profile, but it's for uh, sanitized data based on actual performance from past projects. But so here's my first rodeo, right? Like they're our biggest segment in terms of dollars and closed deals, and we see them here at the top, right? Like aside from they're a much bigger segment of MQL than SQL, right? They have a fairly sturdy bottom of funnel conversion experience. And we see they're kind of in the middle from revenue per deal for my first rodeo. So that's a pretty solid customer segment, but this is something that you would not be able to see if you were not collecting this information at the top and then looking at it all the way as it comes through, and then also some data outside of HubSpot that this would help contextualize, which is like, how expensive are my first rodeo to service, right? Are they lower net margin because it's their first purchase? They are really expensive to service, to onboard and support, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And this is
but
like,
seeing how big the pieces of pie are, and even things like, for example, difficulty with diagnosis at almost $51,000 ACV is the highest. They're the highest ACV, but look at how small they are, right? They're also pretty sturdy, right? We don't lose a lot from stage to stage, but there they are, difficulty with diagnosis, right? They're in this data, they're 14%, 15% of the revenue pie. So fewer, bigger deals. That's a good place to invest some money, right?
yeah.
Like, why
Oh,
why can't we serve these people better and find more of them?
yeah. And this is, man, this is, uh, having never been a leader of a bigger organization, I'm making an assumption here, but on some level, if they know anything about HubSpot, it's usually like it's supposed to give them visibility like this segmentation, right? And that's where, if you start talking about customer journey analytics and you haven't done this yet, right? It doesn't matter. Like, if you can't show dollars related to these segments, you're like, the leaders aren't going to care. And this is a situation where they export the data, start to manage it in their spreadsheets and their own slides,
Mm-hmm.
which, like, at that point, HubSpot is just a lead management data collection tool, right? And nothing else. And it's one property. It's using, we showed 2 forms there, and we showed 1 email, right? And that's just the tip, right? But that gets us to
Yeah,
this spot where, of course, the sales process is happening, right? We've got people following process, and there's closed won deals to get to this visibility. But that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And I look forward to, I feel like we're on a path towards actually getting toward, real customer journey analytics where it's the thing here is like, it's not one and done activity, right? It's like, okay, they
Right.
filled out the form one time. We know they're my first rodeo. Like as you expand people in the buying team and like all these different confirmations can happen without like having to ask directly every time. So maybe they get that email, they fill out the questionnaire, and it's like, oh, at that point they remember that they know everything about the category of the product and they just didn't know what the problem was. And now they move
Right.
to, diagnosis, right? Because that's the other
Right.
thing. Like, as much as we want to serve sales, it's so often that it's like, oh yeah, this is their first rodeo. And then sales gets on the call and it's like, oh, this is not at all their first
Right.
rodeo. And I feel like I feel dumb now and I lost my credibility. And, that's what causes them to say like, okay, I don't trust this data. I'm going to show up the same way at every call. And now the customer
Right.
experience is impacted because I answered all these questions in the questionnaire. Like, why don't you have that data? Right.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
um, I'm looking forward to this journey, man. I really appreciate what you showed today. We do need
Yeah.
to wrap it. And that's it, folks. We showed one property, right? With five things, I imagine even if you can start with, one or two, just start this habit, find these places where you can get this data and start to bucket this stuff. This is the most powerful part of HubSpot and it's not close. Like this is how it built. This is why it is the tool it is. Segmentation, you know, contact records. That's the part that it does better than any other system. So review that stuff, see what you can do better, find some opportunities, and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.